to another segment of Prison Chronicles, a therapeutic platform where males that have gone to prison, females that have gone to prison, kids that have lost parents in prison, parents that have lost kids in prison, spouses that have lost mates, even ex-officers, and anyone dealing, family and friends, and anyone that's dealing with the penal system or anybody that's been in the penal system can come on the show and speak about their life from their vantage point. And today, episode 16, we have a wonderful, special, exclusive segment. We have the Honorable Judge Humphrey with us today. So if you have any questions, Facebook Live, make sure you tap in and ask me, and make sure you keep it PG. I ain't gonna say PG everything, cause just respect the man, cause he is a man of God. He the senior pastor of what church is that, Judge?
Allison Memorial Presbyterian Church.
Yeah, I heard that. And make sure you go to YouTube under De Niro Cook or Prison Chronicles TV, and make sure you press the subscribe button, and make sure you share it, because there's no us without you. And if you a first time watcher, make sure you log on to type in first time, and we'll greet you personally. And we're gonna start off just like this by letting the Honorable Judge himself introduce himself.
Well, my name is Marion Humphrey, and as De Niro said, I am serving as pastor of Allison Memorial Presbyterian Church. I've been there since 1984. Were you born then?
Yeah, I was born in 80. 1980.
I've been there since 1984. And I served as a municipal court judge for 4 years. It was called municipal court when I came along, and now it's called district court. And I served as a circuit court judge for 18 years. Most of my caseload was criminal, sometimes 100%, sometimes 75% criminal. And so I had a lot of experience dealing with these issues.
Okay, I'm gonna ask you this, because when I ask you this, I was gonna ask it later on, but I think a lot of people gonna interact and ask questions that would be more deeper than what I'm finna ask you. So, what do you do now other than being a pastor and being that you're a retired judge?
I still do some legal work, private legal work.
But you got an attorney firm?
Yes, I practice law, but I've cut back quite a bit, and I still take cases though. Yeah. From time to time.
I see that. So
more selective.
So what's the deciding factor whether you take a case or not?
It all depends on an area where I feel comfortable, familiar, and sometimes it depends on the subject matter. Yeah. What really the case is all about. I try to stay away from the more difficult criminal cases these days, but every once in a while I take one if it's something that really interests me, something that's unique. For instance, since I've been off the bench, and this is my 11th year off the bench, I've had only one murder case. And the reason I took that case was because I was interested in the issues, the facts of it. It was a case where a young man was charged with first-degree murder, and it was based upon his fleeing from a deputy sheriff down in Drew County. And the deputy sheriff came behind him in pursuit of him and crashed against a telephone pole, or electric pole rather, and died. And he was charged with first-degree murder because supposedly in the process of committing a felony, he caused the death of another person. And that's not really the usual issue where there's a first-degree murder charge, where someone is pursuing you and you really didn't have, he didn't even have a collision with him. He himself collided against a tree, and the officer in pursuit of him then followed and crashed against an electric pole and died as a result of that. And he was charged with a murder because in the commission of his felony, which was considered to be felony fleeing and also possession of drugs, he caused the death of this officer. That's the way.
So how did that case turn out?
Well, he was acquitted of the murder. Right, down in Drew County. I'm happy to say he's an outstanding young man. Yeah. He was acquitted of the murder. He was convicted of possession of the drugs. I think the jury felt they had to compensate some kind of way, and he had a 6-year term for the drug charge, and he was convicted of misdemeanor fleeing, and he was acquitted on the drug paraphernalia charge as well.
What did you do prior to being a judge?
I practiced law. I practiced law in Pine Bluff before I moved to Little Rock. I moved to Little Rock to become pastor of Allison Memorial Presbyterian Church. And then I had the opportunity to run for district court judge back in 1988. It was a contested race. There were 5 of us candidates running at the time. And at the time, an individual could win an election in Little Rock with just a plurality, any kind of plurality. And so I won that race with a whopping
landslide.
28% of the vote.
Just saying. I'm just saying.
There were 5 of us in that race, and I barely eclipsed the guy who was second to me, Jim Neal, who had 26%. And, you know, I'm a man of faith, so I said, well, you know, if you win with a big number landslide, you might stick your chest out and all, but when you win with 28%, you just have to say, thank you, Jesus. You have to give the credit, all the credit where it goes. And the interesting thing about it is there was a white guy who came to me and suggested I get in this race. He was getting started on his political consulting business. And he said, look, there are 4 white candidates who are going to get in this race. You can get in, and if you work the black community and you work up in Hillcrest and in the Heights, you'll have a good chance of winning. So I thought about that because I had run for an office before I moved from Pine Bluff, where you had to have a runoff you really had to have a majority, and I had lost. And so I wasn't interested in running just to be running, but when he broke it down to me in those terms, that there is no runoff. And the reason there was no runoff is because the law at that time was that a city that had a city manager form of government did not have to have a runoff. If you had a mayor council form of government, yes, there was a runoff, but not in the city manager. Well, after I won that way, of course, the law was changed. And the legislature didn't just say you have to have a 50% runoff. It said you got to win by at least 40% to avoid. And see, I would not have won under those terms when I ran, but they increased it that you have to have at least a 40% to avoid a runoff. And so that caused problems for people like Mayor Scott. Mayor Scott had an initial vote back in 2018 of 37%, but because he didn't get that 40%, that was changed after I won, then he had to have a runoff. He won with over 50% in his runoff. So
let me ask you this question here. Did you ever reside over a case when you knew there was a conflict of interest without recusing yourself?
No, I don't think so. There are some cases where you have to think about them, but I always believe that the public elects a judge to make tough calls. And sometimes there are issues that are very difficult for a judge. There are some issues that surface that may cause to think about them a longer period of time or be uncomfortable, but not necessarily a conflict. And I take, for instance, I'm opposed to the death penalty. And while I was a judge, there were 3 instances where the jury came back with death penalty verdicts. And so I had to pronounce them. I didn't even want to pronounce them. In Arkansas, however, the legislature has relieved the judges of any kind of discretion in those matters. Those are strictly jury issues as to whether or not the death penalty is imposed. So there were 3 cases. One of them has already been executed. She was executed early. Then another is on death row. And on one, I actually was able to set it aside on a Rule 37 issue. And
Rule 37, that's the competence.
Ineffective assistance of counsel. And his lawyer is a good lawyer, but I guess I can say this, I was looking for something that I could hang my hat on. Yeah. And the Supreme Court upheld the decision, and what it was, I ruled that he didn't emphasize enough this guy's redeeming qualities, mitigating circumstances like his ability to draw well. Yeah. He was pretty good in art and that kind of thing. And set aside on that basis, so he ended up with a life sentence. There's a guy who's on death row now, and he was my first. and he killed 4 people in a trailer over across the river somewhere. And I saw his lawyer in the hallway one day, and I said, have you asked the prosecutor about negotiating where the prosecutor will agree to a life sentence rather than submitting this issue to a jury on capital murder? I said, why don't you do that? He said, I already have. And at the time, it was a woman who was prosecuting the case in the prosecutor's office. He said, and she said, there are too many dead bodies, and don't ask me anymore.
Check this out check this out. I got this question here before we go to Facebook and allow them to ask questions. I got this question. Did you ever overrule a jury's decision because you weighed the evidence on your own and you deemed the defendant not guilty?
I don't think I ever overruled a jury's decision, but there was at least one instance where I took the issue away from the jury before they ever went into deliberation on it.
You probably don't remember, but when I first on the capital murder charge in 1999.
You had a capital murder charge?
Yeah, and they put me in your courtroom. And you had a larger courtroom than Langston.
Yeah.
Man, I don't know if it's you or what the determining factors come in at, but they bonded us over to Langston so quick. Man, and I don't know, it was heartbreaking. You know
I don't know how that operated unless there was more than one defendant, and they decided to have all of them tried at the same place.
Now, as soon as I started researching and learning more about the law, I filed for a motion to severance immediately, and motion to suppress statements and things like that. But they bonded us over.
So you were tried for capital murder?
Yeah, I was tried for capital murder. They waived the death penalty after a few months, so I was facing life without. So I stayed locked up for 18 months. And
18 years, wasn't it?
18 months at that time before trial. You know, okay. I was locked up for 18 months before trial, and the lesser included offense was offered. But I mean, if I had to pay the attorney, I would have never saw prison. Not saying I regret going there because I wouldn't be on the path I am today, but if I'd had to pay the attorney, I would have never saw prison because I just wasn't on that path right there. But jury, they gave me his family guilty on the 1st-degree murder. So I was it was on the judge. After they found me guilty of this, the judge had the opportunity to they gave me the lesser charge. They gave me 10 on the murder, 10 on the robbery. So the judge, it was up to him whether he stacked it or ran the concurrent.
Right. Now that part is discretionary with the court as to how it's imposed, whether it's consecutive or concurrent.
Yeah. We're going to take it to Facebook and see what questions they have to ask. Remember, if you got any questions right now, log on and we'll have the judge to answer the question right now. How are decisions made case to case, especially if the cases are similar? I don't know if that was, these questions that people had me to ask you.
Are they talking about different verdicts or different sentences or?
I'm not really sure because, people have sent me questions in, and I don't know if the people that ask me questions are on right now, but a lot of people gave me questions to ask you because I can sit and talk to you for hours, but I can't interview you for hours because I can only ask you questions pertaining to me. We're dealing with my case, so I had the public to ask questions. So I don't know if that's not enough information, dealing with that question. But somebody asked me this, and I used to think about this when I was in prison a lot. If they gave me the opportunity, I'd do it. They said, how do you feel about the military being a rehabilitation tool for those that's already incarcerated and those that are entering the system?
Well, the military has its own rules and regulations as to who can be admitted.
Yeah.
And depending upon the offense and the severity of it, depending upon, I don't know that they permit people who are actually incarcerated to be entered into the military, but that is something that the Congress could change and make it a possibility. I think that if a person has had his record expunged or pardoned, that might be an individual that they should consider, but that's above, my pay grade and anybody else's. It's the Congress that makes that decision. It's not the court's decision. The court doesn't say, no, this person can't go to the military. That's the military making their decisions based upon what the federal law permits.
Somebody asked, why do most minorities, when getting charged with murder, are more likely charged with capital murder instead of the lesser offenses on the books?
Well, it's the circumstances and it's the climate out here. People are just distressed of all the violence.
But don't it make it a capital offense when it's more than one crime that's committed? Like, for instance, like you just kill somebody, that's just murder. But if it's a robbery, don't it take place with more than one?
Well, because that becomes premeditated, and premeditation has to be involved with capital murder for the most part, and so it's a matter of whether or not it was premeditated when the person did it, whether the person acted purposefully. It gets it down to first degree, or whether it's someone who did it knowingly, might get it down to second degree, or recklessly, and then down to even negligently. So it all depends on how it is perceived, and the prosecutor has the power under Arkansas law to determine how they're going to go after it, and it's supposed to be based upon the elements and whether or not he believes that he can prove, in this case I say he because we do have a male prosecutor, whether or not he can prove the elements of, say, capital murder as opposed to first degree, as opposed to second degree, as opposed to manslaughter, as opposed to negligent homicide. He looks at it, looks at the facts and looks at the definitions for each of those homicide offenses and sees where the facts fit in to the definitions of those offenses and says, well, I'm going to go with first degree on this, and I'm going to go with second degree. That's the way the decision is supposed to be made. In a lot of jurisdictions, in order for charges to be made, I think in most of them, there has to be a grand jury. And we don't do it by grand jury in state court in Arkansas. Of course, in federal court, there are indictments by a grand jury, but here it's the filing of an information by the prosecuting attorney, which means that the prosecuting attorney is an enormously powerful individual in the whole criminal justice system, more so than the judge, I think, in criminal cases, because the prosecutor determines what is going to be prosecuted. Now, the judge may make a decision on what's brought in there, but the prosecuting attorney makes a decision on whether or not there's going to be something brought in at all. And they make that decision. It's something that the citizens of the community give to the prosecuting attorney the authority to make that call.
Somebody, Lynn Moore asked, she said, I went to federal prison without a violent crime and all supervised release. I didn't go for a violent crime at all. I own my own business, and I was wondering, when can I get my gun license back?
Probably when she gets a pardon from the president for that purpose, unless there's some statute in the federal law that permits that. There either has to be statutory authority or there has to be a pardon that gives a person the ability to carry a gun, because otherwise you subject yourself to being charged with felon in possession of a firearm at any time under state law.
Leotis Brewer, I think Latobus, he said, I was convicted of a felony about 20 years ago in your court, and I'm looking to go for clemency. What would be the best way to proceed that?
That's very difficult. They're very, very, very political. They're not easily attained because clemency has to be decided solely by the governor of the state in Arkansas. A clemency and pardon, there are very few. The governors don't want to be in the position of overturning what jurors have decided or what the courts have decided. They don't consider themselves an appellate court. That's almost putting themselves in that position if they're going to reverse or amend sentences, and that's what it really amounts to, or change them or free people from their convictions. Now, there are, as I said, they're very few and far between, and you got to have either a governor who really believes that a wrong has been committed, or a governor who just wants to do somebody a favor, and that happens in politics. And therefore, people have come to me saying they need a lawyer to represent them in a clemency hearing, or a clemency petition, or a pardons petition. And at present, I say, let me see if I can come up with a friend of mine whom I know to be a Republican lawyer or someone who's close to the governor, because it is the governor's sole decision, and you need somebody who can go in there and advocate for you. I don't feel that I can advocate to this particular governor. You know, I have nothing against him personally, but we've been on different sides of something, an issue like the takeover of the Little Rock School District. So you probably need somebody who has donated to this governor's campaign. I'm sorry to say it, this is just the way the stuff works. Who's donated to his campaign, or who has a powerful ally or supporter of his who is advocating for you, or somebody who can convince the governor and touch his heart. Yeah. There are some instances where I think a governor makes a decision that is really above politics, but it's really got to touch their heart.
To give you a pardon.
Yeah, or to give you clemency in some instances. They've got to believe some kind of way in it and be touched by some circumstance to make them feel that this person is so entitled that I'm going to use up one of my political chips, or I'm going to be willing to offend a constituency in the public, because a lot of people in the public don't think that governors should change sentences.
Yeah.
You know, people come in and they do jury duty, and once they have come in, sacrifice their time to do jury duty, they want the decision that they have made to be upheld. Yeah. And they don't want the governor. The governor doesn't want that political backlash. So if the governor's going to take a political hit, or he's going to get some feedback, some negative feedback, it's got to be worth it to him. It's either got to get his conscience, or it's got to look politically good to him.
Marion Butler asked, he said, I have a successful dump truck business and would like to know, what can a convicted felon do to protect their homes? I know we lost our Second Amendment rights, but many of us have changed, and is there any way we can petition our legislators to make it legal for a convicted felon to own a gun in their home? I am not asking to change the law, as for it goes with riding with the gun or carrying a gun, just for us to be able to protect our home that we have worked hard for.
Well, that is a change, because a convicted felon can't even have it in his home. And even if he says it's my wife's gun or it's my girlfriend's gun, he's still in violation of it. And you know, you hear that all the time. But they say, you know, we hear this all the time. It's not yours, it's your wife's, it's your girlfriend's. And we don't pay that any attention. You just can't have it around the house.
That's crazy. I mean, I understand, bam, I ain't on parole no more. But I get married, my wife, she able to carry. She licensed to carry and all that.
But you need, whether or not you're on parole, you haven't had gotten a pardon, have you?
Nah.
And it can't. It's not supposed to be in your house.
What about I like even him having a gun? Dump truck business. What about a person like you into entertainment? You have bodyguards. You can't. Your bodyguards can have it.
Now your bodyguards may be licensed to carry. That's different than you.
I'm saying, so my bodyguards can still be around me licensed to carry.
I believe so, because they, they're not going to restrict them in what they do. Your possession of it is felon in possession of it. So if your bodyguard has it, you're not in possession of it. If it's in your bedroom, they will argue that you're really in possession of it, even if it's your wife's, even if it's who you're sleeping with. They're going to say she's protecting you. She's trying to keep you from getting in trouble. Yeah. She's trying to keep you from catching the charge.
So that's the way the law is set up.
That's what the law is. Now you can change the law, but you got to go to the legislature and change it. Man. And when you come to court, I had these all the time. I don't particularly like status offenses with people, and that's what it is. It's a status offense. Your status as a felon makes your carrying a weapon an offense. But you haven't really gone out and done anything that anybody else hadn't done. Mm-hmm. But they will use it against you, and people have to be aware of it. And expungement doesn't make any difference. It's got to be pardoned.
That's what I be telling people. Expungement and regular seal, that don't mean nothing, because you can go get a job right now. A third party still gonna run your status. You know what I'm saying? It's gonna say, And I wonder, could you answer that? Like, for instance, when you go fill out an application, they say, have you been convicted of a crime within the last 5 to 7 years? Mm-hmm. So you put no. You know, 'cause back in the day, people used to lie and say, I ain't been convicted. And later on, they catch up to them. So now it got the question, have you been convicted in the last 5 to 7 years? So it's no. But then once you, most companies that, you know, willing to hire you or looking to hire you, employee, they send your, run your stuff to a third party where they run it. And you still lose the job because...
Yeah, well, that's because what a judge does in saying seal the record, or what a judge says in expunging a record, that is an order that's placed upon the Arkansas Crime Information Center. They seal it, except for law enforcement purposes. But that doesn't have anything to do with these information companies like Axiom, and they do background checks on people, so it's going to show up with them because the orders don't extend to them. Who knows who has that kind of information company anyway? The courts don't know that Axiom is gathering information on their record. Well, we do know that, but we don't know who else does that. And the law doesn't say the private companies cannot maintain that information. And the fact of the matter is, a lot of times people are charged and the stuff is on the internet. Mm-hmm. So the orders of the court don't go and tell, Google or whomever else to get this out of your system. So that's why they're able to come up with the information on people whose records are supposed to be sealed. It's a different world out here now with all this information that's available. And so the Arkansas Crime Information Center feeds into the National Crime Information Center, and for those purposes, records may be sealed, but that doesn't have anything to do with private companies that gather information on people.
Somebody asked, Mona Promotes asked Judge Humphrey, capital murder is based on a premeditated murder. How can premeditated murder be proven based on limited evidence?
Well, they're supposed to supply the evidence, and the jury makes the decision. The jury determines what the facts are. The jury determines the facts based on what the evidence presented to them is. That doesn't mean that jurors know, because they're not witnesses. They can't be witnesses, or either they couldn't be jurors. Yeah. So, but they sit, they listen, they say, this is what happened. That might not be what happened. Yeah. If they made a decision that you committed a murder, that's based upon the evidence that was presented to them, when in fact you didn't commit the murder. But as far as they're concerned, this is what's been presented to us. They are considered to be the fact finder. They're the fact finder unless the parties waive a jury. If the jury is waived, then the judge becomes the fact finder as well as the person who determines what the law is.
When is it best for a person to choose a bench trial? Because I know it's on the defendant, whether you choose a bench trial or a jury trial.
Well, first of all, you better figure out who the judge is.
Yeah.
At some point, for instance, the prosecuting attorney would not waive jurors with certain things with me.
Yeah.
And I think I'd be surprised if they waive them with a couple of judges who are up there now, because they think that those judges require a different kind of standard of proof.
Did you ever reside over in the cases where you went home and it just was overwhelming to you, where it affected your life outside of the courtroom?
I don't think so. There were some cases that were more bothersome to me than others. Some that I think about, did I do the right thing? Some people say, well, I don't take that stuff home with me. Every once in a while, yeah, I take one. Did I give the right sentence? Did I make the right choice?
How do you get that out of your chest? You talk to your wife?
I mention some things to my wife, but I made up my own mind about things.
Do you know, like, for instance, you know how in the Bible it speaks of the government is upon Jesus' shoulders and things like that. So with you being the judge, like, look at Luke 14, 16, Luke 4. In a way, the lady that kept going back and forth to the judge. You know what I'm saying?
Until the judge just gave in to what she wanted.
So with you being the determining factor of somebody's faith, and being a man of God, do you ever think that you convicted somebody wrongly, and you feel that it's weighing on you, and probably can be not saying that it will because God forgive you, but you'll be something that you can be held accountable for at the end?
Well, I think you can be held accountable for whatever decision you've made on any case, no matter how onerous or how less serious it is. Most of the cases where they're really hard cases, I think the jurors made the decision. So the judge didn't have to make the decision. Now you sit there and you say, do I want to be a part of even pronouncing the sentence that Timothy Wayne Kemp should get the death penalty in the case, and go through the motion of setting a date for the execution. Of course, I know the execution is not going to be carried out on that date anyway, because if you've been given the death penalty, it's going to be years before you get it. I might say the death penalty is going to be November 1st. But, you know, if somebody's sentenced to death today, they are not going to be executed on November 1st, because you're going to have years and years and years of appeals and post-conviction relief efforts. So, but these are just things that it's part of the job.
Did you ever go view execution?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I don't want to see that. I don't want to see it. And I hope something can be done on Kemp's case, where he isn't executed, but, you know, based upon his killing 4 people, as the prosecutor said, too many dead bodies. And she didn't have a problem with it. And that's what I try to tell our folks, well, anybody. You don't want to put yourself in the position where that kind of decision is being made on your life. Because the jurors come to court, and they come from West Little Rock, they come from North Hills, they come from Chenal, they come from all these places. They've read the newspapers. They've seen there's a lot of crime in the community. And when they come to the jury duty, they're like, this is my opportunity to do something about what I've been reading about in the newspaper, or what I've been seeing on TV, on social media. And jurors can be sympathetic to the prosecutor because they believe that the prosecutor represents the state and the prosecutor is on their side. They're on the side of peace and tranquility in the community. And interestingly, once I had a juror who came to jury duty, and every time he came, the prosecution excused him because he said he could not be fair.
Yeah.
And he was a white man. And the reason he said he could not be fair is he said, every time I come in here, there's a black guy sitting over there charged with something. And it just looked to him as though something's wrong with this picture.
Do you think it's a target for, you think it's unfair, like the law and the way it's set up with blacks versus whites? Because a white can do the same crime that a black do. What do you think about that?
Well, whites do the same thing. Timothy Wayne Kemp, by the way, is white.
Yeah.
And 2 of the 3 where we had the death penalty in my court were white. There was a white woman, and she was executed. She was executed because she killed her 2 children. One was 1-year-old and the other one was 4-year-old. Now, I think she could have avoided the death penalty if her defense had been handled differently. And I was really bothered by the way they handled that case in my court. Because here again, I'm opposed to the death penalty. And here in the opening statement, her attorney says, our defense is not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect. And he throws his statement out to the jury. He says, you know, she's got to be crazy to kill her kids. Mm-hmm. And he sits down, basically. That's not the way you present this. There's something to be said for his position, but that's not the way you deal with a jury on this case. So when it came to the trial itself, and they found her guilty, and you know you've got this bifurcated case, so you've done the guilt phase of it, now you got to do the sentencing phase. He only put her on the stand as a witness. She gets up there in my courtroom, and she tells the jury, she said, well, my lawyer and I have discussed this, and we decided that if it comes to this point, I prefer the death penalty so that I could go and be with my kids. Now I'm sitting there on one hand cynically saying, you know, if I'm those kids, I'm not sure I want to see Mother Terry up in glory. No, I'm being a little facetious. But I'm also sitting there like, why are y'all doing this in my court? I don't even believe in the death penalty. Y'all in here like conducting this case like this. And then her lawyer tells the jury at the end, you didn't buy our defense of not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect. Go ahead and execute her. I'm like, no, you didn't. No, you aren't doing that in my courtroom. And that's what they give her. And you know, she didn't have a whole lot of sympathy because the defense even had to excuse some black people.
Yeah.
And black folks are usually the ones who are less open to consideration of death penalty. Now, you cannot sit on a jury in a capital murder case where the death penalty is being sought unless you say, you're willing to say that I am willing to consider the death penalty. You know, it doesn't mean that you really will impose it, but you got to be able to say, I will consider it. So that excuses a lot of people right away because they say, I won't even consider it. I can't be bothered. And too often, those are African Americans who take that position. So whoever's sitting there charged with a capital murder and might get the death penalty, you're not going to have as many African Americans to choose from in terms of jurors because they're going to get out of there quickly. They're going to say that I can't even follow the law if the law says I've got to consider the death penalty. I just don't believe in it. I'm not going to consider it. You're excused for cause. You get up and leave. But it was the defense itself had to excuse one black woman on this jury. You know, she hears that this is a case where this woman is accused of killing her 4-year-old child and her 1-year-old child. And Sister Girl sits there doing the jury, the voir dire, and she's like rolling her neck. Well, I raised 5 children all by myself. You know? I don't know why she has such a problem raising her.
So she was good. She already had up.
So you're not getting any sympathy from me. So defense says she's excused. We'll strike her.
Hey, Your Honor, my mama, Unique Unity, Paula Porter. She gonna ask, why is it that when police officers kill a person that are found guilty, and other police officers are there and watch but don't step in, are not charged like other people that be charged with the same crime because they were there but may not have known what was happening? Please ask this question because that's what. Can you answer that?
Well, her question is, if there's more than one officer there, and one officer actually does the killing, but there are others around there, she wants to know why those other officers aren't convicted as sort of as accomplices.
Yeah, just like it happened with us. Like if me and him go in, me and JD go in to commit a crime, I get killed in the process of this robbery in his house. He get charged. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? So why the police don't get charged when they watch their fellow officer kill somebody?
Well, in the George Floyd case, I think those other officers are
charged but look, they all held them down too, because ain't no in the world one person, I don't care how big you are, one person gonna hold another grown man down with his knee on his neck.
Well, I think he did, because this guy was handcuffed.
Yeah, but everybody else was holding him too. You know, he was subdued. He was,
Well, that's the way they make the distinction as who did what. They look at the facts and say, well, we can't get all the officers for purposely or even knowingly. So we're not going to do murder on them. We'll do something else, some other kind of offense on them.
Yeah. Carlea Upton Randall say, Your Honor, what most are you proud of currently in communities, homes, etc.?
In our communities?
I guess she's speaking about it, or she said, proud of currently in community home. I guess in the community with us.
Well, I'm proud to see young people advancing. I'm proud to see young kids going to school, getting their lesson, and doing things the right way. And I'm proud to see parents who are working hard, doing the best that they can for their kids under difficult circumstances out here, hard times, economic disparity. There are parents who are struggling, and they struggle and they still do things the legal way. They try to instill the right values, and they try to teach their kids the things of God so that these kids can have a value system. I think our community is suffering from a value issue, that we're just concerned. Our kids is just materialistic a lot of times, and that has just been imposed on them. It's not something that they just learned on their own. They see other kids, and they're not patient enough in waiting for things to come about. They want things yesterday,
I think that derived from the parent raising that child up to be materialistic, but the child, and it's easy to provide for that one child the energy and the financial background, but then the parent get to have multiple kids. Now you can no longer provide for this child that was accustomed to having this. So, and he ain't getting the energy, he or she not getting the energy that you was once putting into it, because you got to put it split up within the other kids. So here it is, that will make the crime rate go up, because he accustomed to living a certain life where this guy over here got Jordans and all this stuff here. So mama can't get it. He ain't got no skills, because we ain't teaching our kids no skills. In prison, the black guys, most of the blacks work in the kitchen and laundry. The white guys work on construction and maintenance and stuff.
No, why is that?
They grandparents and daddies taught them stuff. We ain't learning in the hood. They getting us a basketball.
But once
and a
you
football.
get there and you see that, then why don't you?
Well, in prison? I realized the design of that, because it's not the white man's fault. We got to want to do better. We got to learn trades, and we got to want to teach it and distill our kids. But I opened my mind up. I learned how to do razor wire fencing, concrete, torch welding, roofing, sewing machine, cooking, baking. I can bake from scratch with the proper consistency until I make your heart smile.
Well, I'll have to check that out.
I mean, we can do that.
I don't believe you.
I'm just saying, I ain't gonna sit and lie.
Bring me a caramel cake. Let me see what you're talking about.
I can't do everything. I ain't say I was just but I know how to do what I know how to do. Miss T in the kitchen at the PTF program. Shout out to Scott McLean with the Pathway to Freedom program, because I learned a lot of principles in that. And if anybody somebody that's incarcerated is able to go to the Pathway to Freedom program in Riceville, contact Scott McLean to get your child over there, because he will come home a different and a better person. But at the same time, I was in the kitchen over there, and they taught us how to make a lot of cakes, and even making a caramel cake. That's an ingredient where you just can't stop stirring, because it's gonna solidify right then. You know what I'm saying? But I just never mastered a caramel cake. But back to the subject at hand. No, I got you. I ain't lying. I can cook. We're back from a short commercial break. And remember, if you know anyone that's seeking employment that has gone to prison, not even just gone to prison, anybody that's seeking employment, make sure you hit us up at 501-551-8489. And if you have, I'm going to say, proper transportation, we got you. We're going to connect you with somebody that can give you a job. Make sure you go onto YouTube under De Niro Cook or Prison Chronicles Television, and make sure you press that subscribe button. And make sure you share it, because there's no us without you. You know what I'm saying? And we're going to continue this conversation with Your Honor, the Honorable Judge Humphrey. And I want to ask this question here. My main objective when I was in prison was to get out and break all stereotype. You know what I'm saying? Where if you didn't know me, know my story, you wouldn't even know that I was a convicted felon and did 18 years in prison. So after people, and like most people that did time, people like us, we the true role models. We need to be head. We need to be the head of most people programs, things like that, because we the mentors. How do we even? Cause I want to do it, but how do you start like that? Do we need people like you, or how do we get a chance to do it?
Well, I think we work together, and I think that if there are opportunities that people who have not been to prison see where we need help, and we need help from the brothers who've been through this system out here on these streets. I don't see any way we can do it without involving people who can approach folks who are out here into different things and can speak to them about their own experiences and to speak to them in such a way to discourage their involvement in areas of activities that will land them in prison. We need you young folks.
I mean, we need to. I mean, it's easier said than done. I would like to be in a position where I can be a motivational speaker.
Well, it's not just motivational speaking too. It's in working hands-on with them after school.
You definitely got to be hands-on.
It's got to be hands-on. It's going into neighborhoods where some other people are reluctant to go and not comfortable going. And if you feel a certain comfort level, just go in there and talk to folks. Talk to these parents, these mothers who are struggling with these young people, especially these young boys, and try to show them a different way. And I think we do it through our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I think we do it because we are convicted that this is part of our ministry, and because we don't know who will advance and who will do better. We don't know who will emerge. Yeah. When they sent you to prison, they probably didn't know you were going to come out and do this.
No, because, I definitely know. You can't see down the line. Definitely can't see that. But, have you ever went inside the prison to see?
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
It's not a place where I want to go.
Shoot, no, very oppressive. What units did you go to?
I don't remember the units. I did something in chapel down in Cummins, but I should say before I moved back home to Arkansas, I worked for Prison Fellowship. Yeah. And so I went to a lot of prisons across the country. It's a prison ministry that was started by Charles Colson after he got out of federal prison years ago.
Charles Colson, Fellowship Bible Church?
Prison Fellowship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he gave back to the prison.
Yeah, he was at the White House with President Nixon back in the day. Yeah. And Nixon had all kind of junk going on up in the White House, and Colson's offense was being involved not so much in Watergate per se, but in the break-in of Daniel Ellsberg's psychiatrist's office, because Ellsberg had something to do with releasing Vietnam War papers or something. And so it was a burglary and all, and he was involved with it. And once he went to prison, he came out and he decided to devote his life to working in prison ministry. And that's, people who are sitting on the bench have certain backgrounds. So when I went to the bench, I didn't have the same background that some of the other judges have. A lot of them have been prosecutors in the past. Yeah. And I was a minister, and I had worked in prison ministry, which is a different kind of approach than others would have. So when we're electing people to these offices, you got to look at their backgrounds and what they're concerned about and whether or not they will consider alternatives to sentencing people to prison.
Have you ever been bribed or threatened?
When I set a bond on some members of I think they were the 21st Street Posse when I was a district court judge. Somebody called me in the middle of the night. He said, I hear you trying to do something to my boys. And he indicated he was from California somewhere. I perceive that as a threat. Yeah. As in terms of a bribe, I've never been bribed. I chose not to hear it as a bribe, but some preacher on behalf of somebody else told me somebody was coming through my court, and if I did a certain thing, it would be beneficial to me. I chose not to consider that to be a bribe offer.
So, I mean, was it beneficial?
You like that.
Oh, I didn't go into the particulars because you know you don't know who's setting you up.
Yeah.
I mean, I got a little godly wisdom to it too now. Plus, I'm not into that. I didn't go there to do bribes or to accept bribes. That's what's happened to this situation up here in Conway. It's an awful situation. And that wasn't a criminal matter either, but where the judge reduced a civil judgment. You know, the jury awarded this family $5.2 million because of the death of their loved one in a nursing home. And Judge Maggio reduced it from $5.2 million to $1 million. Cut $4.2 million off of a jury verdict. Damn. And that's criminal. Yeah. Now he received money for his campaign from the indirectly, I take it from the owner of the nursing home. And it just so happens that in doing so, the nursing home had coverage, as I understand it, of $1 million. So the effect of it was to relieve the owners of having to go in their pockets because their insurance would pay $1 million. So then they wouldn't have to pay anything. And that's why this guy Gilbert Baker is on trial in federal court now for the bribery. He was the go-between. He was the guy on behalf of the nursing home owner. I don't understand how the nursing home owner has not been indicted at this point. The judge is in federal prison for his role. He's already there, and he came back to testify as a witness this past week. So there's corruption. A lot of people think that there's discrimination on African Americans in sentencing and charges being filed. I think there's also discrimination, for instance, in civil court. I think if you and I are in a car accident and some white people are in a car accident, I think that insurance companies would tend to offer the white people more money for their injuries than they would black people. So discrimination is insidious. Racism is insidious. It can come at all different levels because they will do that. You know, a black person to get a certain amount of money for this kind of stuff, you know, you got to have an arm and a leg cut off in some instances. A white person can maintain all their limbs and may be offered more money than that black person.
Can you speak to them about us convicted felons being able to vote? You know what I'm saying?
Well, now you can restore your rights after you have you're no longer on paper. I think you have to go to the clerk's office and sign up and make sure that. I think, though, a person should be able to, this is just my personal opinion, it's not the law, though. I think they should be able to vote again, even when they're on parole. Yeah. Because they're out working and they're out paying taxes. And so I think they should be able to do that. And I don't think that our state is one where that is likely to happen anytime soon, given who's in our legislature. And I think that's why people have to understand that we've got to vote on all these positions out here.
Somebody asked you, what can we do about gang and gun violence? Can we really legally organize to prevent what the system is doing to us? And why don't you run for governor?
Oh, I don't need to run for governor. We have a young black man who is outstanding, who is running for governor by the name of Chris Jones. And I hope I'm not being improper to say that I'm supporting him. He would be outstanding. And the question is, are our people going to get behind him? Are we going to do what we
got a nice following behind us. What's his name again?
Chris Jones.
So get out and vote. Get out and vote. He was a stand up person in the community. Give him, you know, saying his personal opinion to somebody that I don't even know if he know him personally, but evidently for him to speak well of him, we have to get out and vote. Don't wait till the laws are passed.
I know him personally. He's a native of Pine Bluff. I didn't know him before he really started running, but I've known his mother since she was in the 7th grade, and he's academically outstanding. His wife is academically outstanding as well. They'd be great people to be leaders of this state. But I think he would have compassion. I can't speak for him. I haven't looked at his position papers on issues of criminal justice. But just knowing what I know about him, I believe that he would be fair, he would be open. I think he'd try to do the right thing for our state. He's very, very interested in education. And his background is one of math and science. He has a PhD in urban studies from MIT. He graduated from Morehouse College and then did graduate work at MIT. His wife, you might have seen on television with Governor Hutchinson.
Have we had any black governors?
Nah.
Dang.
Nah, we haven't had any black statewide officials since a superintendent of instruction after Reconstruction. We just haven't elected. There's black candidates. It's very difficult for them to raise money. And now you have to have money to get on television, get some kind of advertising going, because people just say, well, black can't win. But you're guaranteed to lose if you don't run. You're gonna lose by default on those situations. So Chris is very well organized. His wife, as I said, is a graduate of Howard University and Harvard Medical School. She did a lot of the briefings with Governor Hutchinson on the COVID issue, and so I look forward to. You'll be looking for them in the future. Now, about this gang and gun violence, I almost believe I'm too old to talk to young people who are out here in the midst of gang and gun violence. And, you know, I don't know what you do if you don't live in certain neighborhoods and you don't see people, because a lot of young kids who are into gangbanging, they're not going to show up at church. So where do you go to reach them? And folks my age, they're concerned about safety and all kinds of issues. And you wonder about what's on the kids' minds. How are they doing some of the horrific things that are being done, and doing it with ease and comfort, seemingly. You know, taking somebody's child's life. How do you do that and not have a conscience about it, and not think about it, and do it as though it's something that's routine that you ought to do?
Yeah.
What do you think about that? Well, how can we reach the youngsters?
Man, I was asked this question before many times. In my opinion, I mean, I answered and people said, man, some people told me I sound foolish, that I sound silly. But I just feel like this. Not saying it's gonna happen. Not saying I choose for that to happen. But people ask me, how do I think we get rid of black on black crime and things like that? It's gonna have to take some type of mass extermination for a person to realize what's really happening before our eyes. Cause right now,
mass extermination.
I'm saying, like, it's gonna have to take something. And I ain't saying I want it to happen, but it's gonna have to take some type of like a mass, something mass realize, dang, you know, this happened deliberately to us. We need to stand together and come together. Other than that, it's not gonna change. It's gonna forever be black on black crime, because they manipulated since birth, and then you got the Willie Lynch syndrome and
Willie Lynch syndrome, and to me, when you group off into gangs, it's like old style African tribalism.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Definitely.
This tribe going against this tribe. Why? Why do you got to be in a tribe anyway? You're just all one group of people. So I think that why is all this animosity? What is the animosity based upon? I took an interest in guys who were in the 21st Street Posse back in the day, a long time ago, especially after they got out, and I I befriended a bunch of folks who were in it. And, you know, I've got some friends who have gone through the system and who've been in gangs and may still be claiming, I don't know. But, you know, they don't come to me that way.
You ain't never rep nothing?
Pardon?
You ain't never rep nothing?
Represented them?
Yeah, like a gang. You ain't never rep no gang?
You mean, when you say rep, you mean?
Like, for instance, affiliation. You know, hey, y'all can move up. Y'all can be.
No, I'm too old for that. You know
I ain't
how old
saying
I am.
I ain't saying you is now. Shoot.
No, I'm too old. They didn't have this stuff. Wasn't like this when I was a child.
I mean,
so it's more difficult now. That's the other thing about it. It's more difficult for young people now. We didn't have all this stuff. Life was simpler. Back in the time I grew up, I'll be 72 years old in November. Yeah. And so, yeah, he said, yeah. And we didn't have gangs. I was afraid of gangs when I'd go visit in Chicago as a child. I'd go up and visit relatives, and they always had the vice lords and stuff like that. But the Crips and the Bloods and all that were really involved in stuff around here when I was a district court judge back in the late 80s and 90s and stuff like that. And then I guess it's still going on today. Yeah. We didn't have those groups in Pine Bluff. I'm sure they have them now the way the crime is down there.
Have you ever had any violence erupt in your courtroom?
I got up once who made a move. They didn't really get violent, though. My bailiff stopped him.
He was trying to get to you?
No, he wasn't trying to get to me. He was trying to get to one who was being brought out of the holding cell. And back in the day when I was a district court judge, there was a holding area off the courtroom. Like right now, the people down at the county jail and they do video and all that kind of stuff. They don't parade them in. They used to bring them in, sit them on the front row in the courtroom. And so one day there was a guy who was being brought in and he had killed this man's son. And that guy got up. He wanted to make a move. My bailiff intervened and stopped it. But it could have become violent. But the kids, I looked up one morning, I came off the bench, it was a row of black boys, all of them dressed with black shirts on, and all of them had a flat top haircut. They in the courtroom, sitting up there, I guess, claiming whoever they are, showing support for one of their partners, who was one of their associates, rather, who was being brought out. So that kind of stuff has happened, but we never had a real violent eruption in there.
Texas, I've been hearing this since the beginning of time, especially when a lot of stuff you never hear about until you go to prison. It's almost like, but is it true? Are you deep within the Masons? You know anything about Masons?
No, I used to be one years and years ago.
Is that real that a person can go in a courtroom and throw up a sign and he off?
No.
I've been hearing that since the beginning of the time.
No, because there wouldn't be as many folks in prison if they could do that. I'm sure the guys who were in the joint would have heard about it and learned what the sign was, and they would have given it to somebody when they came in the courtroom before they were sentenced. Somebody would have passed that on to them. No, that's not the case.
So.
But what about changing your nationality?
Changing your nationality, like, Moorish science and all that.
Indigenous Indian, like, if I was to change my nationality and come in court with different laws because.
We honor the laws of the United States of America and the state of Arkansas and Arkansas courts. And if somebody comes in there with a different law, they're gonna have to discuss that in their cell. Man,
that's crazy. Man, that's so one law.
Yeah, we go about the laws that we have on the books here. I have to go. The judge has to go by those laws if they want their paycheck, and they all want a paycheck now.
Like, with you being too old, as you say, to go in the community and talk to certain people. Muff. With you saying you too old to go in the community to speak to certain people, what, and I know I kind of asked around this earlier, what would you want us in the community to do to help you?
I don't really mean that I'm too old. What I'm saying is, I don't know the vernacular out here now. I don't know the lingo. I don't know the language. I mean, I'm too old in that sense. It's not that I wouldn't go in there.
Never get old. Say, man. You know what I'm saying? That's how you kick it off. Say, man. You know what I'm saying? But
and the reactions of young people, I don't know. I wonder what's on their minds, because I saw some things that I just found particularly heinous for young people to be involved in when I was sitting up on the bench. Yeah. And then I would see, I would see people in other circumstances. So I'd have to catch them outside of the courtroom to be able to talk to them.
Yeah.
And ask questions and talk to them back then. And now it's a whole different generation. It's the grandchildren of folks I started off seeing who are in these courts. And I guess I guess there is some common language, but it's more difficult to reach folks. I can reach. I try to be able to communicate, and then again, the Lord gives you words to say to anybody. But I think we do better in our communities if the kids had a better appreciation for the elderly. I think they'd be more respectful, and they'd be more respectful of the hardship that they visit upon people whose children they harm. And there's a lot of heartlessness out here, and I just don't understand how young people get to be so hard, so young. I can see evil building up in old folks like me, but to be young and so vicious and so cold-blooded and so violent, I don't understand. I don't understand where all the anger comes from, all the hostility, and just cold-bloodedness. One case that I remember that I particularly thought was cold-blooded, where these two young girls, and I don't understand how young girls have this kind of deviousness about them. They were about 14, 15, I think. And so they lured two guys over to a house in Southwest, and these guys, older teens, but not that much older. And why the guys went over there without my having to say in the media. The guys went over there and behind them. Well, they get them over there, out come three guys out of a room. It's an ambush. And they take these two guys, they tie them up, put them in the trunk of a car, and take them out to Highland Park and shoot them down like dogs. I'm like, what is going on here? So, there were three of them. The state was going to, two of them were tried and got life sentences. The third one was supposed to turn state's evidence, and the state had an offer for him that would eliminate the life sentence for him. He could have gotten a term of years. Instead, he flipped the script. But he had entered a plea of guilty. He had not been sentenced, however. And so the sentencing was supposed to take place after his testimony. And because he flipped the script on them, the prosecutor said the deal is off. Now, he had entered a plea of guilty to me, and I had the option of allowing him to withdraw his guilty plea, which he wanted to do, and I guess go to trial, or letting that guilty plea stand and going ahead and sentencing him based upon the range that was available. And the range that was available on Class Y, of course, was 10 to 40 or life. And the other two co-defendants had received life sentences from the juries. I believe both had jury trials. And so I did not permit him to withdraw his plea. And I had the option of 10 to 40 or life. In that case, I gave him life. Now, I'm sure there was hostility from his side of the courtroom, his mother and people sympathetic. But the mother of one of those two boys on the other side of the courtroom caught my eye, and she looked at me, and without saying anything verbally, she just said, that's what you see up there on the bench. You've got two sides here. You're just not just the side of the people who are being sentenced and who think the system's bad and all this kind of stuff. Here's a mother who wants something done because her baby was killed under these circumstances. She wants some justice from the court. And shouldn't she get it? Yeah. She's angry behind this.
Now,
she's
we
hurt.
want you to look at the screen and do something about that first sentence up there. That's
Mention something about cookbook publications.
Yes, that's us.
Oh man, this is great. I've enjoyed this. Yeah. So, but I look at you and I'm like, this young man's got talent. He's the one we need out here, talking to the people. Now, what about your record? Can you get you innocent? So. Even though convicted,
I would need that pardon. I would need that pardon.
Get out and vote.
Did your brother confess?
Yeah.
And what happened to him after?
He got life without plus 27, but it was kind of too late for him to try to, get
Clear
some.
you?
Yeah, because I ain't gonna speak on the detective Ronnie Smith. Anyway,
Ronnie Smith.
yeah, I mean it's just crazy how even some questions was asked, but like it's time somebody asked why can bailiffs, not bailiffs, but detectives be in the courtroom, doing. It was a question that was asked, but you don't have to bring it up.
Oh,
but it was a time that, Detective Ronnie Smith, he say,
he's now a bailiff.
yeah, I noticed that.
Mm-hmm.
He was, I saw that when I was in prison. I said, but he got on the stand and took oath, and I was sitting there, and he said when he pulled me over, I gave him permission to check my vehicle. He said within my car, he said I'm driving, I'm on the driver's side. He said on the between the armrest or the passenger and the driver, he say is a piece of paper that say Plan A and Plan B, how to commit this robbery, how to do this, tie everybody up, throw the keys, do this, and he say it was on the seat, a plain sheet of paper, where if I'm the driver, I can look like this and see it like I'm studying. It took me a long time to start back praying to God and stuff like that, because I didn't understand how. I'm like, what? At the time, I never seen this, never knew this existed or nothing in my life. You know what I'm saying? And at that time, this is 1999, I had a Grand Marquis. I didn't have no air. My windows down. So while you saying, anyway, so while you saying I'm riding, looking at it like this, I ain't got no air. My windows down. It'll blow.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy, man. I'm talking about just a lot. It took me a long time to just be able to pray and talk to God again.
Did you go to a jury trial?
Yeah. That's why they gave me the lesser included. Lesser everything. I think I just knew I was going home. I'm talking about, I had Lot Rolfe, Lot Rolfe, shout out to you and Louis and Marzi, but Lot Rolfe is an attorney now. Mm-hmm. He had just became a public defender. He was just stepping out. But
Louis is a good dude.
They did a wonderful job. I'm talking about, and I think the jury got tired and just said,
well, jurors will do that. But again, the jurors come there with a certain mindset now. I told you who comes in to do jury duty. And a lot of people, my bailiffs were really tough on black people who were trying to get out of jury duty, because he understood that if black folks don't do it, there's no input in this decision. You're going to be left with folks who say they've got time to do it. So you take a housewife from Chanel. She doesn't have to go to work every day, so she got time to do jury duty. And it's that kind of thing, the people who have time to do it. Do you really want all of them being the jurors? And the folks who say they got to go to work, or if they don't, they own their own business, and if they're not there, hey, they have to close the door, so they're not going to make any money. And the folks that I got, we had a lot of medical people, and they'd always say we got patients and this, that, and the other. But the folks who come in, as I said, they've read the papers, they've looked at social media, they've watch the news on television and say, this is my opportunity to do something about what we see going on in our community. And so I think a lot of them come in there with that, and they don't mean to be, I can't say all of them, but I don't think all of them mean to be mean or prejudicial, but this is their perception. And so you're going against this perception out here. And some people, although they say that as he sits there and no evidence has been presented, he's presumed to be innocent until proven guilty. But I think subconsciously a lot of people will say he's not sitting there because he was singing too loud in Sunday school. Yeah. That he's into something has happened, or either they wouldn't be doing this, they wouldn't be expending public funds trying to convict him if he really didn't do something. And so you're fighting that, and you really got to fight it. You got to go after it in these situations, and it can be difficult. I'd hate to be a defendant, period, because I don't know that they really get to that burden of innocent until proven guilty, and proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Because to some people, a reasonable doubt is different with other people. And the judges are going to give the definition of what constitutes reasonable doubt, a doubt that would cause an ordinary person to pause and hesitate in the graver transactions of life, you know. But with some folks, I don't have a doubt here. And that can be very, very unfortunate because they can make a mistake.
Well, check this out, Your Honor. We're finna conclude this segment of Prison Chronicles. If you can right now, look in that camera right now, and for the live viewers and everybody that's watching, can you get them some type of words of wisdom and just speak from the heart, you know what I'm saying, and speak to that youth, that woman that got this struggling youth that she can't do about herself. Just speak to the public right now to conclude this.
Well, I would say to that mother, just keep praying, just keep trying, don't give up. God hears your voice, your anguish, and perhaps that child does too. But I understand there are enormous pressures out here, and there's this peer group pressure, and we've got to all come together and figure out a way to overcome that kind of pressure that's out here on young people. Also, you've got to instill values of them so that they don't just go after that which is material, that they have to go after the fruit of the Spirit and emphasize to them there are such things that God rewards: love, peace, joy, you know, self-control, all of these things that pertain to the fruit of the Spirit. You need those things in your life. That gets to the values that we used not to have a lot. I grew up, my mother worked in private homes. I didn't have no daddy. And so, you know, that's not something that is all that new as far as I'm concerned. But you can be rich in values, and you can be rich in love. And that's what I think we need to emphasize, is that character is more important than just having things, all this bling bling out here, all this stuff. And people out here pursuing silver and gold and all this, and a lot of stuff will be out of style next year. And so you need to have some everlasting values and some beliefs that say, hey, I'm not just conducting myself in a certain way to please my homies and please this person or the other. I'm conducting myself in a way that pleases God. It's got to be God-centered. And I think if you put your hands in the hands of Jesus Christ, it'll be all right. And even at that, there are going to be some bumps, there are going to be some mistakes, but in the end, it'll be all right.
Well, this concludes another wonderful segment of Prison Chronicles. And remember this, if you got any more questions that we weren't able to answer and you would like to get them personally answered by the judge, just relay them to me. You can email me at dcookbookings@gmail.com. You can text me at 501-551-8489. You can hit us up, even comment on the comments when this segment is released on YouTube. But at the same time, make sure you go to YouTube under De Niro Cook and press that subscribe button. Press that like button and make sure you share, because there's no us without you. And remember, you know, any male or female that's looking for employment, hit us up at 501-551-8489, and we're going to help you as much as we possibly can. And then it can guarantee you a job. You know what I'm saying? If you can get there, you then they got you. But make sure you keep up, you know what I'm saying, keep us in your prayers. And Cookbook Publication got some major stuff, and keep on the lookout. And thank you for the love and support. Appreciate you, Your Honor.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Appreciate you. Appreciate you.